I'm Benjamin Hall, and I'm searching for heroes. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. As you will know, over the last few weeks on Searching for Heroes, we have been exploring the theme of forgiveness. We began with Azim Khamisa, who chose to forgive the boy who murdered his son. And then we spoke with Amanda Gregory, who told us that forgiveness is not always necessary, but instead it is more about finding peace with our past. Well, today we continue that journey with another extraordinary story. My guest today is Scarlett Lewis, whose 6-year-old son, Jesse, was killed in the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting back in December 2012. It was one of the darkest days in America's history. In the days before his death, Jesse had left a message on the family's kitchen chalkboard that just said, nurturing, healing, love. Those 3 words, written by a 6-year-old, became the spark for Scarlett's mission and the foundation she then created in his name, the Jesse Lewis Choose Love movement. But I think what makes Scarlett's story so remarkable is not just what she has built, but the choice that she made at the very, very heart of her grief. Was the choice to forgive the man who murdered her son. For her, forgiveness was the only way to cut the cord of anger and pain, and also the only way to reclaim her own life. So today we're going to talk to her about that choice, about, she uses these terms, walking through the fire of trauma, about what forgiveness really means, and also about how love can perhaps be the most powerful force for healing, and also how you can forgive but not forget. So thanks for joining, and here's Scarlett. I want to obviously talk about, 2012 and what happened, but first of all, I want to say that you have also said that you chose to walk through the fire. You made that decision that you wanted to go and feel it rather than push away the pain.
Yes.
And so when it comes to healing, why did you think that was so important for you? And I suppose, what did that look like practically day to day to have to walk through the fire?
Well, first of all, I practice being present with my boys. Life is happening right here, right now. It's not 5 minutes ago, and it's not 5 minutes in the future. And so thankfully, because I always talk about, living life with the fewest regrets, and that is being present with the ones that you love. So I already tried to live my life like that as much as possible, and intentionally, by the way. Thank goodness. And then when Jesse was murdered, I wanted to do the same thing. I wanted to be present for what was happening in the moment. I mean, in a sense, there was so much devastation. Obviously, the greatest pain that I've ever felt. In fact, I thought I was going to die because the pain was so horrible at his loss. But at the same time, there was so much beauty, so much love, so much caring from all over the world. And I really wanted to be present for that. It just blew my mind who showed up and what they did and said, and meals that were made and comments that were made, the whole experience of Jesse's wake, and all these people that came to it from across the country and world, and just the different scenarios and people and why. And it was just fascinating, really. And I didn't want to forget any of that. And even so, I had to have help from my family to write my book, because I did. Your body goes into shock, which is also a beautiful thing. It helps you walk around and continue to function. But I also knew that there were gifts in the pain, and I didn't want to lose any of those.
It's interesting because I get asked all the time, and I know that totally different circumstances, but what it's like. I've been covering wars and conflict for 18 odd years, and everyone says how difficult, how tragic. And I often say, yes, but you'd be amazed at how much bravery and kindness and courage and family ties you see out there. And it always takes people by surprise, but sometimes you do see some remarkable things in the most difficult, horrible places. How do you, though, you said that you were like this, you've always wanted lived your life like that, but how do you kind of train and teach the next generation to feel that or to embrace that?
Yeah, well, so I'm actually sitting in front of, and my background is our Choose Love formula. And this came from a message that I found shortly after Jesse's murder that he had left on our kitchen chalkboard. 3 words, phonetically spelled, because remember, he was a first grader, just learning how to write. And those 3 words were nurturing, healing, love. And I saw those, and I literally had a lightning bolt go through me. And I thought, that's the solution right there. That's the message that would have prevented all of this. And by the way, Benjamin, maybe even what happened to you. So I just realized I'm going to be spreading this message. So from Jesse's example of courage, we found out within days of the tragedy that he had literally sacrificed his life to save 9 of his classmates, and his message of nurturing, healing, love. We put together this formula, and we teach kids to have the courage to face pain. We give them a different perspective of pain, rather than how it can harm us. And by the way, that's how our brain focuses. We teach kids that pain has a purpose, that even though, you can't always choose what happens to you in life, you can take your personal power back in how you choose to thoughtfully respond. And choosing love is this thoughtful response from our prefrontal cortex, not our fear center. So we teach them to have the courage to face difficulty, conflict, and get curious, to pause literally in between, Viktor Frankl's famous quote, in between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose. And as human beings, our choice is our superpower. We can choose from moment to moment how we thoughtfully respond. We tell them that. So we say, pause when something happens and get curious about what the gifts are, about how you can learn from this, how you can grow from it, how you can be strengthened. There's something in everything for you. And then the formula goes on into gratitude, having the courage to be grateful even when things aren't going your way. We know from research that literally fortifies us from the inside out to better be able to handle adversity, whatever it is, with more strength and grace. And then we teach forgiveness. Forgiveness is probably the number one most powerful thing that I did in my own personal healing. And so many people, you talked about how, kids aren't afraid. Well, it's so funny because a lot of adults don't understand what forgiveness is. They think that it means that whatever happened that hurt them is okay, that they're supposed to forget it, that they can't hold anybody accountable. And absolutely not. It simply means that you let the pain go. You harvest the gifts, whatever it is, the meaning, the purpose of whatever happened, and then you let go of the pain. And then compassion in action is identifying a need within ourselves or somebody else and actively doing something to help ease that suffering. And by the way, when we do that, we help and heal ourselves. That is choosing love in a nutshell. That's what we teach kids. We teach them about post-traumatic growth. And by the way, most people haven't heard of it. And that is the way that we are created as human beings. That is to grow through pain. We all want and need love, but we know we're going to have pain as human beings, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And a lot of times we just spend most of our time resisting or avoiding pain or numbing ourselves, when in reality, that pain gets us out of our comfort zone into our growth zone. And that's where we find the best version of ourselves. That's where we find the best version of other people too, as you were saying, Benjamin.
And I suppose it's not just about forgiveness, isn't just about healing yourself. It's presumably about healing the other side. It's about healing and preventing it from happening again. It's spreading a message to society around you. Is that true?
Well, that's a good observation. I think a lot of the healing is for you, the person that was hurt. I do think that forgiving, finding some sort of empathy can neutralize thoughts of revenge. And I think that unless you forgive, you are giving that other person or party or group or country power over you. And that anger can escalate. And in order to de-escalate it, forgiveness is necessary. And it's really the only thing that stops the desire for revenge, which, is at the base of a lot of wars.
Can I ask then, did you go through different chapters? So was there a moment where you didn't have to experience the anger and then the revenge and then the reflective period and then the forgiveness? So presumably there was an arc of your feelings to get to the place where you could embrace forgiveness. I imagine it didn't come straight away.
I think it's different for everyone. And I think because of my faith, I didn't have to go through the angry phase. And I completely understand anger.
Even straight away, even at the very beginning, you never reached the angry phase.
No, I really didn't. I got curious right away about what must have happened to someone to lead them into becoming a mass murderer. And, he had been a student of the Newtown school system his entire life. And he hadn't graduated too long before he chose to come back to the same elementary school that he attended, back into the same classrooms, to perpetrate this heinous crime. For those of you who aren't familiar, and most people are, by the way, around the world, 20 first graders in 2 first grade classrooms and 6 educators. He murdered his mom before he left that day, and then he killed himself. So there were 26 victims, but really 28. I wondered what had happened to him, because I know that babies aren't born mass murderers. Babies become introduced to fear. Babies learn fear about 8 to 12 months of age, I have learned. But then that anger, that hatred, the revenge, it grows, and it grows a lot of times from pain and the inability to manage that pain. And so I was curious as to what had happened.
But so if the question was, no one is born with that sort of hatred or evil inside them, then there must have been an understanding that perhaps the parenting or the education, at some point, something needed to be fixed. And you must have gone back and said, and I've seen the amazing work you've done since, it must have been about looking for where did that happen and how can we address it? And where do you think that really began? And then how are you now trying to change that?
Well, I got up at Jesse's funeral and I said to the congregation, because everybody had been asking me, what can we do? And I said, there is something that you can all do. I said, this whole tragedy started with an angry thought in Adam Lanza's head. And I pictured him as a little boy having an angry thought without the skills, tools, or nurturing environment to be able to manage that thought. That thought, along with pain, along with bullying, along with neglect, along with most likely abuse, turned into the Sandy Hook tragedy. And I said to the congregation, amazingly, a thought can be changed. So I asked everybody to start thinking about what they think about and to change one angry thought into a loving thought every day. I said, loving, kind, compassionate thoughts, they feel good, and that is reflected in our behavior. Angry, hateful, resentful thoughts, they feel bad. This is the cognitive triangle. And that's how we show up in our relationships. So everyone went out really to the four corners of the United States. They start calling me, texting me, emailing me within a week, saying that one simple act had completely changed their lives. So I knew that I was onto something. That's the foundational element of the Choose Love movement. It's very, very simple. It's thinking about what you think about and choosing a loving thought over an angry thought. I mean, that's literally where you start. And then you start teaching character. You start teaching essential life skills that help you be resilient. You start teaching about pain as having a purpose and helping you grow to take away the fear of the pain. Because I really do think that fear is what exacerbates pain. It makes it worse, and it also inhibits healing. So if there's anything that we can do to reduce that fear, and we do that by giving kids this formula. Kids, by the way, and big kids. It's a universal language. We teach it to all ages and stages to reduce fear and increase love.
And I know that you've have taught this in 10,000 plus schools to over 3 million children, and I know the amount of good it has done. But I also can't help but look around at society at the moment, and I think there seem to be more cracks, that there seem to be more divisions. Do you ever sometimes think that for all the good, that there are so many people doing great things, but there's something pulling in the other direction as well? Do you ever think about that?
I do. I do think about that. There is something pulling in the other direction, which makes the Choose Love movement even more necessary. Yeah, absolutely. And the incredible thing about that, Benjamin, is that it is a choice. And most people, honestly, most people, I don't think know they have a choice. And by the way, sometimes I forget. And so, yeah, sometimes I get sucked in, and then I have to have somebody remind me, or maybe I'm at a school and I see some incredible outcome and I think, I almost forgot myself. That it's a choice, that I can choose love as a thoughtful response in any situation, circumstance, or interaction. But you got to make the choice, and you have to make it several times a day.
We'll be back in a moment with Searching for Heroes. It's interesting because I know you've written also about the relationship between forgiveness and not forgetting, and, having those two things side by side. So, thinking about peace and, trying to understand the moment while also remembering what happened that day. How do you hold those two things side by side?
I do that a lot too, because there's not a day that goes by when I'm not talking about the tragedy. I'm not introducing it to a new group, sharing my experience and what I've learned from it. I think that is the power of forgiveness. When you truly do forgive, and by the way, when you can actually come to feel compassion, even for the person that hurt you, in understanding maybe the pain that they went through, I really do believe that's when your locus of control comes squarely back into you, and you can talk about the situation with neutrality, that it's not triggering, and you can, that you can fully harness all the gifts of that situation and move forward with your personal power intact.
There are so many people who will, if they haven't gone through something, they would say that sounds impossible, to find that compassion for someone who has taken away something so important and close to you. And I mean, if in what kind of compassion do you feel, I suppose, Madam Lanza? And how can you explain to those people who say they do not understand it, that how you can do that?
Well, first of all, that compassion benefits me. It benefits me, allowing me to feel joy.
The umbilical cord that you've talked about, that it being the umbilical cord that you felt a connection to him, and forgiveness was cutting that umbilical cord.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I did find out some things. I mean, and let me just share two little stories that I heard. And I think that for those who are listening, who are thinking, this is impossible, this is, a one-off. It's really not. When you start to learn, when you get curious, you activate a different part of your brain anyway, rather than reacting out of fear. You're reacting from your executive functioning part of your brain. And by the way, that's where you choose love from. And I got curious. I heard a few stories. When Adam was in first grade, he and his mom made little invitations for his birthday party, for his 6th birthday party. And they handed them out. He actually, they put him in a backpack. He came to school. He handed them out. By the way, this is at Sandy Hook Elementary School, to all of his classmates, and no one came to his birthday party. I'm just saying, like, if you can put yourself in his shoes and feel what you would feel at 6 years old, you're excited about your party, you're all set for it, and nobody shows up. And then when he was in 5th grade at Sandy Hook Elementary School, he wrote a book, handwritten, with illustrations that he did. It was called The Book of Granny. And the book was about a witch that came to Sandy Hook Elementary School with a broomstick. This broomstick opened into a semi-automatic weapon and murdered children. This is a story that Adam Lanza wrote when he was in 5th grade. He brought the book to school. In fact, he had made copies because it was his intention to sell them, evidently. And they were taken from him by teacher, and no follow-up was ever done whatsoever. So, I mean, if you have the ability, empathy, to put yourself in his shoes, and you think that, as far as I know, all the kids that have perpetrated crimes like this have cried out for help in their own way. If you look at that as a cry for help, like, this is what's in my head, this is the story I'm choosing to write, I'm bringing it to school, it was confiscated, and then no one says anything to you about it. No one says, hey, why did you write this? What are you thinking? It's like people, that can be translated into, no one cares about me. And I'll tell you something, Benjamin, I realized what we were doing before Sandy Hook. After, now that I'm a victim's mom, I really, I quit my job. I dedicated my life to being part of the solution. And I'm like, we are not doing enough for our kids. Obviously, what we're doing isn't working. I'm not going to go and do something that was, already in process, join a movement. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to address the root cause of the suffering that can lead a human being to become a mass murderer. And by the way, it's the same suffering that leads people to substance abuse and to mental illness. How about address the root cause? And, I hear stories like that. And, and I've spoken to other school shooters. I want to ask them the question I think nobody else is asking. How have we failed you? How did we fail you? You were born just like I was, with all the potential I had, and somehow you got so derailed that you became a mass murderer. What happened? Obviously you didn't get your needs met. And what were they? And I will tell you that, if I had to boil it down to one word, they say, I wasn't seen. Nobody saw me. Nobody had the courage to see me. I was just sharing the stage, by the way, at a school resource officer conference. with Aaron Stark. And Aaron Stark has a viral TED Talk called I Was Almost a School Shooter. So now he travels around and informs law enforcement about this. And his solution is, quote, giving love to those we feel deserve it the least because they need it the most, end quote. These are the kids that don't feel seen. These are the kids that have this hard as rock exterior that are going to make you realize that they are not worthy to be seen if you're trying to be kind to them. These are the kids that are really tough to love, but these are the kids that need it the most. And I agree with Aaron when he says that.
Is that the role of parents, or is it the role of education? Is it the role of other students? Like, at what point should people be seeing? I mean, the parents can drop that ball, the school can drop that ball, fellow students can drop that ball. Is it at every level needs to just pay more attention? Is that what you think, or could parents do that themselves?
Yeah, it's all those levels. I mean, you see in the United States, they're starting to hold parents accountable, and I am for that for sure. I mean, I think that there's so many different places. There's accountability in schools, but I hold myself up as an example. I was a single mom of two boys, and I really didn't understand all the things that I do now that I've taught myself trying to get to a solution. And I wasn't socially and emotionally competent myself. I didn't manage disappointment well. I had, I had some anger, and not that anger is bad, anger is fine, but I could have probably managed my emotions a little bit better. But those are actually skills and tools that have to be taught. My point is, when you're a parent that loves their children, but isn't socially and emotionally competent, you can't give your kids what you don't have. So really, schools are the number one way, I think, to either teach social emotional competence or at least reinforce and practice, if best case scenario, kids are learning it at home. I tell parents, you want every child to have the essential life skills they need to be able to manage disappointment, to manage the grievance that escalates into an attack or substance abuse or mental illness or any kind of violence. You want all kids to have that. So you may be a home where you feel very confident that your kids are getting this, but there are going to be other kids in the classroom that aren't getting it at home. And we want to make sure that every child basically has the understanding and awareness that they can, we call it, choose love as a thoughtful response in any situation, circumstance, or interaction. When you do that, by the way, you are your highest and best self. It's great for kids. It's great for adults too. It's great for workplaces. We're in prisons because, of course, the inmates didn't learn this. And, usually they say if they had, they wouldn't have become incarcerated.
We'll be right back after this. Scarlett, I wonder, would you take us back to that day in 2012? And first of all, to what it was like as soon as you found out, and then talk a little bit again about how you thought about then and there, how you were going to move forward in that one moment, dramatic moment.
It started out as any day, just like, for anyone, and got my kids to school, got to work, and heard that there had been a shooting in Sandy Hook. Then somebody came up and said, it's at your kid's school. You never think that something like that is going to happen to somebody like you. I did go back to the school to pick up Jesse. And of course, he wasn't there, along with a long list of other people. And by the time, so we stayed at that firehouse all day. And by the time they actually made the announcement, I had pretty much figured it out by everything that went on that day that Jesse was dead. Went home to my mom's, just completely can't even describe what that's like. Also thinking I'll never go back to my house because, I couldn't imagine walking in the front door of my little farmhouse, seeing Jesse's boots and toothbrush by the sink and little PJs and stuff. So anyway, I did have, at the firehouse, my older son, JT, was there as well. He had been in lockdown in middle school, which was half a mile away. My mom, who also lives in the same town, picked him up and brought him there. And just, having him there, I was thinking, well, we'll just, as soon as they find Jesse, they were telling us that the kids had run outside and were hiding in the woods or in cabinets, and it was going to take them a while to find them, which made sense to me. So I was just kind of waiting for them to bring Jesse back, which is what they were telling us they were doing, which is the only reason I would have his older brother come to that place. But then as the day wore on and it became more apparent that there was something bigger going on, I did realize, and remember, I practiced being present. I was trying to be present then too, that I was modeling for JT how to move through tragedy, maybe at that point. And I did have what I call a couch moment. A few days later, I'd never met anybody that had lost a child to violence. So they had called in kind of like global first responders that respond to mass tragedies. And there was a woman assigned to me and a few other parents. Her name was Dr. Laura Asher. She was just an amazing human being. And it was her idea to bring in a woman who had lost her son to violence 20 years prior. So I remember them bringing this woman in, and I'm looking at her just like at that point, I didn't know, do you live through something like this? It hurts so much. Like, what is my life going to be like? Where do I go? What do I do? And I see this woman who lost a child 20 years out. And I look at her like, I'm going to live. I guess I'll live because she's still living. And then she starts telling me about her life. And not probably 5 minutes after she starts talking, I hold my hand up and I'm like, thank you so much for coming in, but and for sharing with me. And I really appreciate it and everything. But I'm thinking in my head, I just had so much to think about them because I didn't want my life to look like hers. I didn't want to be angry and vengeful and full of regret and remorse and anguished 20 years out. I had a 12-year-old son. I had to model for him how to move back to joy. And it's like, okay, I guess nobody's going to put a roadmap in front of me and show me how to do that. I'm going to have to figure it out myself. And so that really actually, it did its job. It gave me hope. It made me realize, all right, I'll have to figure this out. And you know what? I can. And this Choose Love movement is me figuring it out for myself, really, and then kind of sharing that with other people.
That's post-traumatic growth right there. And you felt it. And I sometimes wonder, does everybody really have the ability to do that? Is it nature, nurture? Are some people born with the ability to bounce back and others aren't? So I don't know. Do you think everyone has it, or can it be learned?
I think it depends. I think if you start teaching it at a young age, before there's been a lot of damage to that person and trauma, even then it's possible. But if you start teaching it at an early age, yes, I think you can experience post-traumatic growth and by the way, because this is how we teach it, because of what happened to you, not despite what happened to you. And that is so powerful, right? I think you grow because of the pain and difficulty in your life. In fact, we use this metaphor of a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. And the caterpillar, how does that happen? It weaves a chrysalis, this really tight casing around itself. It metamorphosizes into a butterfly. And then that butterfly has to struggle. It has to break out of that chrysalis, and it's a painful looking process. And if you open the chrysalis before that butterfly, to help that butterfly, to make it easier, that butterfly dies because it needs the struggle to become strong enough to fly away. But then something else happens too. It becomes beautiful from the inside out. And I totally believe that's a metaphor for life, that we become strong and beautiful from the inside out because of the pain that we've gone through, not despite it. And I believe you can teach any child that. I believe as we get older, I think that we hold on to our pain. We believe that it becomes part of our identity. And I think it becomes a little bit harder because we have our own preconceived notions of how courageous we are, of what we can forgive and what we can't forgive. We allow fear to pervade us. However, it is possible for everybody to be resilient and to experience post-traumatic growth because that is how we're designed as human beings. That is why there's pain.
Wow. Scarlett, that's absolutely the most perfect way I've ever heard it said. And I think a perfect way to finish. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for sharing that story. And I hope that can spread. I hope that message spreads. And I know you're doing everything you can to make it spread. And in Jesse's name, and from something so tragic, you've built something really amazing. And it's remarkable. Thank you.
Well, Benjamin, thank you. And thank you for this podcast, because you're helping spread people's stories. And as we were talking before, you're giving a gift of vicarious post-traumatic growth. I hope that your podcast spreads to the corners of the world and that people listen and that they learn and that they can take the different stories and what they learn in the stories and bring it into their own lives and realize that whatever has happened to them, whatever pain they have, they can literally harvest gifts from it, and they can let that pain go and they can become the best version of themselves. So I want to thank you for this really powerful podcast.
Thank you, Scarlett. And I imagine if everyone just, instead of doing big, grand things, maybe if everyone can just do one thing a day, every little one, great moment helps. And if everyone just starts doing a little bit of them here and there, it builds and builds.
You know what I say? It's start thinking about what you think about and change one angry thought into a loving thought. And that compounded, we know that doubling a penny every day in 31 days is $10 million, right? So compound that. And by the way, with neuroplasticity, our brain's ability to change and the way that our brain is wired, if you start thinking loving thoughts rather than angry thoughts, if you literally start focusing on this formula, courage and gratitude, forgiveness and compassion and action, you can literally rewire your brain. Every time you change an angry thought into a loving thought, you are pruning from your fear channels and you are adding to your love channels, and you're making it just a little bit easier every single time you do that. You're going to see such a huge benefit to your life. It's just the little changes, as you say, but we know that little changes over time create, just huge positive influences. And so you're not only going to be doing this for yourself, by the way, but you're going to be doing it for others around you. And through the ripple effect, through to the entire world. I mean, you may look out there and you see what's going on and you feel a little bit helpless, maybe even hopeless. But by the way, the change starts from within you. Start doing this and you are part of the solution.
Perfect. Thank you, Scarlett. Keep doing the amazing work you're doing.
Thanks, Benjamin. Thanks for helping me spread the message.
What a pleasure. Thank you. Well, what a conversation that was, really. I'm not sure I've spoken to someone who has gone through something so traumatic, felt so much grief, and yet been able to build something out of it, being able to think about it and to use how awful it was to try and prevent it happening again, to try and help other people who are going through something so bad. You know, I think Scarlett has lived through something that no other parent should ever have to face. And yet she chose that path that many of us, I think, would find impossible. She made the decision to forgive the man who murdered Jesse. Not to condone what happened, and she was clear on that, but instead to free herself from the anger and pain that could otherwise have consumed her life. Out of that choice, she built something extraordinary, the Choose Love movement. Bringing that social, emotional learning into schools, into homes, into communities all over the world. Millions of children have been helped by it. And it is really an attempt to make sure something as terrible never happens again. And I think Scarlett really reminds us that forgiveness is not a one-time act. It is a process. It is a daily decision. It is a way of taking back your own power. And I also think we hear that quite often on this podcast. You know, there's no such thing as one simple cure for anything traumatic. It's a constant voyage. It's constantly resetting yourself, constantly reminding yourself to stay positive. And I know Scarlett continues to go through that, as she said, constantly. And her story really shows us that even in the very darkest moments, there can be growth. There can be healing. And I think it challenges us to think about our own lives. If there's anger that we might be holding on to, there are people that we might be struggling to forgive. And I think she would want us to ask whether choosing love, compassion even, which is a remarkable word that she used, might be the first step in reclaiming our own peace. So, I don't know, I think if you take anything from this conversation, I would say let it be Scarlett's reminder there. And that is just start by noticing your thoughts. Change one angry thought into a loving thought. And then do it again tomorrow. And little by little, those small choices can change not just your life, but they can change the world around you. So, Scarlett, thank you for sharing your story, for honoring Jesse's memory in such a powerful way, and for reminding us that forgiveness, although it can be so hard, is also one of the most courageous choices that any of us can make. And I hope you join us again next week on the podcast. Thanks for listening to Searching for Heroes. Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcasts Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.